On today's podcast, Miles Victors. A couple of weeks ago, Miles sent me a 5-minute video that he'd made showing his 2-year weight loss journey, during which he lost over 230 pounds. With his permission, I shared his video on our main YouTube channel, where it's now averaging about 10,000 views a day and hundreds of positive comments, many of which were asking for more information on his story. So here it is. Enjoy the conversation. Miles, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. In case anybody isn't sure who you are, you're best described as the person who was on my YouTube channel a couple of videos ago with a transformation that had people in tears in the comments, quite literally. I hope you've had a chance to kind of go through and read some of the things people have been saying. It was doing exactly what I thought it would do, which is inspiring people. So to backtrack a bit, you sent me a little video summary of your transformation, your weight loss, and importantly, fitness transformation. I don't like just referring it to as a weight loss. It's a real fitness transformation, mental and physical. And I get lots of those, and they're amazing to receive. I enjoy every one of them, but I can't do much with them because what can I do with them? People just send them to me and they say, look what I've achieved. And I email back or message back and say, dude, that's amazing. Well done. And then yours arrived. And I explained the exact bit of yours that made me decide to do something with it. But suffice to say, I stuck it up as a YouTube video of my own, obviously with your permission, in case anyone thinks I stole it. And it got exactly what I wanted, which was it got, as it stands today, 130,000 people looking at it. And yeah, people just being inspired. What's that like, knowing that so many people have seen you go from where you were to where you are now?
Well, it's kind of crazy. I've thought about, I've followed you for a decent amount of time, and I always thought it was really cool that you got to be on the internet and to share your story and what you do and what drives you and all things that are important to you for so long. And I've dabbled in that space and thought, hey, this would be really cool for me to do. And I had, I think, like 80 subscribers to my Instagram or something, a couple weeks ago. And I thought, whatever, they're all my friends and family and nobody who knows me. And 2 years came up where it was time for me to celebrate kind of 2 years from when I started my transformation process. And I thought that I needed to honor what's happened over the last couple of years. And so I just made a little video and I posted it up for friends and family. And then I thought, I need to say thank you, to people who have been a part of my journey. And you were one of those people. And I just sent it out saying, hey, it's just something I made and I don't care what happens to it. I just want you to know that you're a part of this story and thank you for being a part of it. And then just kind of blew me away when a few people picked it up and sent it out. You specifically putting it on YouTube and sending it out on the YouTube channel was enormous. And it's been relatively transformative for me because I was very much trying to force in my mind what my story should be for people and what I had value of. And my value, I thought, was in my ability to instruct. I'm a relatively eloquent person. I can explain things very well. I need to teach people. And if anything, over the last couple of weeks, I've learned that the power of motivation, inspiration, and just being authentically myself and vulnerable has such enormous value to people. I've been reading these comments, and some of them have made me a much better person just knowing that I've made a positive impact in somebody else's life, something that I didn't really anticipate happening. So it's been amazing. It's been awesome.
It should be amazing. I read through those comments, and people's lives have been changed by seeing what you did, and it's as simple as that. I mean, it sounds quite a kind of a grand statement to make, but that's literally the case. Because when people often ask me, what was the trigger for you to get in shape in the first place, and I often say to people, it's really hard to pin it down to something because for everyone it's different. And for some people, it will be as simple as seeing somebody else either in worse shape than they are, or in a similar shape, or maybe it might not even be somebody who's condition, let's use that word, even resonates with them directly. It might be someone that thinks, wow, I'm injured, but that guy was overweight and he did it, and off they go, and they're on a journey, and not only is that person impacted by seeing what you did, their wife, their husband, their kids, their parents, their friends, their boss, everybody around that person ends up in a better place. So yeah, I mean, it did exactly what I wanted it to do, which is it touched people. Interestingly, it is the highest rated for thumbs up likes video that I have on my entire channel ever. It has 99.9% thumbs up, which basically means everyone that ever saw it gave it a thumbs up, and one person probably died at their keyboard and headbutted the down button by mistake. Let's wind back. For anyone that hasn't seen the video, you were overweight.
It's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and I've been there. Although you beat me, you were heavier than I was. 450 pounds. Am I right?
Yeah.
How did you get there? And what was that like for you? Because everybody's kind of journey to get in the bad place is different, as well as their journey out of it. So yeah, how did you find yourself where you were at the beginning of this?
I don't know if my story is very uncommon when it comes to how I got there. I mean, I think my size is relatively uncommon to get to the point where I got. But in terms of the stepping stones to get there, it will resonate with a lot of people. I've just always had a problem with my weight. Ever since I was a kid, probably started putting on weight around 8 or 9 years old. I grew up in Alaska, and it's where I was born and raised. And we had moved when I was a child to a small town called Kenai, Alaska, and I was pretty isolated. And that's when I find, looking back through pictures and remembering that time of my life, is when I started putting on a little bit of weight. And from then on, I was always the chubby kid, the kid who always carried his baby weight and never lost it. And then just throughout my adulthood, big lover of food, big lover of greasy American food, the American version of pizza, burgers, wings, all that stuff, just all the donuts, not just savory food, all the sweet stuff too. So ate a lot of food, didn't move a whole lot. I also have a very engineering mindset, which means that I'm all about efficiency. And so, what's the least amount of work I can do to accomplish my goals, right? And that is a double-edged sword, is it allows you to be a decent engineer, but usually, you find a lot of shortcuts and ways to avoid effort and work and stuff like that. Anyway, long story short, it just slowly crept on and on and on over time. And I say slowly, it wasn't one of those 1 or 2 pounds a year. It was, 10, 15, 20 pounds a year type thing for me. And just got to the point where it became almost like a snowball rolling down a hill. Because once you get to a certain weight, what you can do physically is dramatically different than what you could do 50 pounds ago. And so now it was even harder for me to get any motion or movement or exercise in. And that made my calorie expenditure drop even lower. And I still had the appetite that I did. And so it just got worse and worse. And so once you tip over that 350, 400 pounds, it's tough,
And also mentally, I mean, I got up to about 350 pounds, and yeah, mentally, people that just say, hey, eat less, move more, it's easy, as they kind of walk around with their six pack. It frustrates me that you can't kind of give them a piece of your mind, literally in the sense that they could experience what it is like to be the mind attached to a 350, 450 pound body. Because if you are fit and healthy and jumping out of bed and going for a run is part of your day, to imagine, well, I would just do a bit more of that is quite straightforward. But if it's not part of your day, and getting out of bed, physically just getting out of bed, is something that is quite arduous, to go for a run is just insane. I mean, it's like telling somebody that has no money, well, just have money. Well, I simply don't. So you find yourself heavy. Before you got to the point of 450 pounds and starting the 2-year journey that you've just completed, did you try? Did you have previous attempts at losing weight or not?
Yeah, I went down. So about 10 years ago, I read Scott Jurick's book, Eat and Run.
Right. Ultra runner.
Yeah, ultra runner. And I just, it was mainly looking because I'd watched the documentary. I think it was called the Forks Over Knives, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I went whole foods, plant-based diet, full all in. And I read about this guy, Scott Jurek, and it also is when I found Rich Roll. And, it's kind of that typical vegan endurance athlete journey about 10 or 12 years ago. And I did very extremely low, low to no fat, all whole foods. The weight just crashed off. I mean, I went so deep as to like fruitarian diet, like the whole thing, right? Very unhealthy, very unsustainable. You snap a finger and then it came back on, when I fell off the wagon because it was too unsustainable. So that was the last real attempt that I had done. And then I went completely the other direction, ironically enough. I'm kind of an all-in kind of guy. About 7 or 8 years ago, where I lost maybe 50, 60 pounds on a carnivore diet because I thought, hey, I've done the fruitarian thing, no animals. What about all animals?
Absolutely, yeah. And you're at this point, you're owed some animals as well.
Right.
I'm vegan, so I must have a few cows kind of stashed somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, they're out there somewhere.
Yeah. They're mine when I want them. Yeah, they need to be ready.
So it was just bad on both sides. It was just very unbalanced, and again, not sustainable for me. I actually think that a vegan diet is 100% sustainable. I think that you have to approach it with nuance and variety versus just like nothing but bananas and watermelon. So I've tried before and I've failed before, and I think that mainly it had to do a lot with the mind. And not addressing some of the emotional concerns and not necessarily addressing them, because I don't think I have all mine addressed, but not being aware of the emotional issues that I was also fighting with and acknowledging them and knowing that they have to be dealt with instead of ignored,
I mean, it's stating the obvious. The mind is everything. It's the mind that tells you to eat the food. When people say it's just willpower, hang on a minute, where's that willpower coming from? From my head, because my head's telling me to open the fridge right now and stuff my face. Yeah. So it's a bit like saying go to the cops when the cops are corrupt. It's all in your head. It's all willpower is in a way very, very useless. It's like saying to an alcoholic, it's easy, just focus and don't have that drink. Well, that's ridiculous advice. If that's the only advice. So you tried a couple of times. What? Because this is what always interests me. I'm 50, wife, kids. You're 40. How old? 40?
Yeah, I turned 40 in a couple weeks.
All downhill from there. So you're about to turn 40. You're married. You've got 4 kids. Same as me, isn't it? Yeah, 4 kids. What were they? What was their reaction to losing weight and it going back on? Were they aware of, I mean, the kids probably not, but your wife was, what was that experience like? Because I probably had a very different one to you, because when I was losing weight, I was on the verge of divorce, and which ended up in divorce. So I was very isolated in my weight loss, which actually wasn't a bad thing, because it meant I could just focus on doing nothing but losing weight. I didn't have to worry about what anybody else thought. So what was your experience like?
So I train a lot. When I'm in peak training mode, I'm probably upwards of 15 to 20 hours a week, where I'm working hard. And that's obviously a giant sacrifice. And some people look at that and say, well, you should be spending that time with your family. If you did this for your family, you should be spending it with your family. Before I lost weight, I was pretty crippled. I had to walk with a cane. I had severe degenerative, almost arthritic symptoms in my ankles, knees, and hips. I'd been to a doctor several times about them, and they didn't really have a whole lot for me. And so I pretty much couldn't walk more than maybe 1,500, 2,000 steps a day, maybe 3,000 if it was an active day. My places were basically my bed, or my chair at the office, or my recliner down in the basement. My wife actually surprised me with a Christmas gift years ago with this recliner, because she didn't love how she never saw me, because when I came home, I just laid down in my bed because I just hurt so bad. And so she got me this recliner. So in terms of like what my family noticed overwhelmingly that I was making efforts to not be in my recliner or my bed. And so I got to spend more time with them, and we started changing what we did. We went on a lot more walks and hikes together as a family. I was still too heavy for a bicycle, so I couldn't really do that, but I could walk while they slowly rode their bikes. And And this transformation has happened with a lot of their support. My wife has been overwhelmingly supportive, clearly, because she wants me to be healthy and well. My older children absolutely got it. My oldest is turning 16 this year, so he's been very well aware. And then his younger brother is 14, and my daughter is almost 12. So those three definitely have been very well aware of my process and what it's taken. And they've been cheerleaders. They've been to virtually every one of my races that I've raced. They come to all of my important events. And they don't always see all the sacrifice that happens that I'm doing, behind the scenes. They don't see that on some of my 3 or 4 or 5 hour long runs in the mountains, I'm up at 3 or 4 in the morning to make sure I get them in so I can spend the Saturday with them. But they've been some of the best cheerleaders I've had. So it's impacted them in good ways, I think exclusively for the most part.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. And something that I tell people a lot is don't worry unduly about the sort of the gut reaction that you're being selfish and you're somehow depriving your kids, your partner.
Well, endurance sports are really selfish. Like they can be seen as very selfish endeavors because you spend a lot of time by yourself grinding out hours and miles, and that can be really challenging mentally. You start playing games with yourself because, again, you have the mental unhealth that got you in your problem in the first place, to that level of unhealthy living. And it's still there. It's kind of like they say alcoholism is when you're sober, your alcoholism is doing push-ups in the next room over, waiting for you to let them back in.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
And that's the same thing with unhealthy living. I don't want to equate, a bad relationship with food with necessarily, alcoholism or addiction of any kind like that. But it does have similarities.
I have a lot of experience of supporting people with alcoholism, and I see disordered eating and alcoholism. There obviously there are differences, but there are also massive similarities. And having been incredibly close to obviously my situation and others on the alcoholic side, I'm not afraid to make that link as clear as day. What's so cool about the kids is that your children are going to get you at 50 and 60 and 70. I mean, anybody that thinks, oh, it's a pity that you're doing a 3-hour run in the marathon. Well, it might be, but they can spend 3 hours with you when you're 65 that they probably wouldn't have had with you at all had you still been the weight you were. I mean, there's no question for me, if I'd have not lost the weight to be here at 50, maybe, but I don't know. I don't know. It wouldn't be for sure. I like the idea that now at 50, if I dropped dead of a heart attack, people would be surprised. Not impossible, happen to anybody. But people would say, that's a surprising thing to have happened. Mark Lewis off YouTube, who'd have thought, had a heart attack. And I look back and I think, I could have dropped dead at 35 and people wouldn't have been puzzled. I want them to be staggered when I die at 80 because they thought I'd make 115 or something. That's my objective.
Yeah.
So your kids, your wife, everybody gets you for so much more and for so much longer statistically at the expense of going for a few runs. I mean, the two don't even compare. And what you're describing, that lifestyle of coming home and being in pain and aching and just having to kind of crash in bed, are you really there for them anyway?
No, you're an absentee father at that point, regardless of your, living or dead status. You're not there. And even when you are there, you're not there. You're there as you being there is not a whole lot better than somebody video calling you into their lives, because all you can do is watch. You can't actually participate. All you can do is watch and maybe cheer them, verbally from the sidelines, but you can't do anything with them. You can't be there with them. You can't wrestle with them because you'll just, within 5 seconds, you'll be out of breath and on the floor, on your back, just wheezing because you can't do anything because you're just so out of shape. And I know that mine is an extreme example. Somebody who's carrying an extra 50 pounds, yeah, you're maybe not as mobile as you can be. Your back hurts a little more than usual. You can still be there for your kids. In my case, I couldn't be there for my kids. I was a voyeur in my own life.
Actually, this brings me to the thing I mentioned earlier. And there was a line in your video that you sent to me that kind of cut through everything else that I saw in that video and made me think, okay, I've got to do something else with this. I can't just do what I do every other time and just say, hey, well done, and leave it there. And I'm so pleased that so many other people in the comments picked up on the line as well. It was this. You said, I hated myself even in my favorite places. I mean, that just cuts right to it. You can be with your children, your wife. You can be seeing amazing sunsets, sunrises. You can go on holiday to the most amazing places. You can. I did everything I could to make my life seem on the outside good. I had cool cars and I had a good job, so we had great vacations and stuff. But no matter where I was unhappy because I would wake up every morning, look in the mirror and think, dude, you're just too fat and you can't move around. And as you say, everything hurts. It's not something you can clearly cast off and just ignore for the moment and just revel in whatever it is you're supposed to be reveling in, because you're literally wrapped in your problem. It's there. You can't take it off. In fact, ironically, when you take everything off, it's the only thing left.
Yeah.
You wake up in the morning, you look in the mirror, there it is. You go to bed at night, you look in the mirror, there it is. It doesn't matter how cool your car, your house, your job, how amazing your kids, beautiful your wife. When it comes down to it, all we really have is our body. So that line, you hated yourself in your favorite places. I guarantee you, people will have heard that and started crying. I mean, just literally, I heard it and just got goosebumps.
Yeah, I just honestly, with that video, I don't have very fancy software to make anything, so I just kind of threw things together and tried to line it up with the music that I had in the background. Which those who've seen the video on Mark's platform, he didn't have the rights to the music, but it was still great without it. But anyway, I just recorded what I was thinking as I was watching the video, and at a 5-minute video, it probably took me 6 minutes of recording time to just put it together, and I just toss it up. And again, I didn't give it a whole ton of thought. And it's interesting the things people call out that resonates. I think that a lot of us have the same thoughts. We might not verbalize it quite the way that we want to, but I'm grateful that people felt like I felt, that they understand what I mean by that. And it doesn't have just to do with obesity. It doesn't have to do with just physical health. I mean, that kind of cuts to the core of depression, of anxiety, of a whole host of other things that we carry with us, not just the physical weight. The physical weight is very easy to see, but a lot of us carry very similar emotions that are invisible, but also you can't just shrug it off because it's still with you in some way, shape, or form. So
yeah, what happens when people have that and they see you or me or anybody? This is where social media can be, for a change, something useful. They see people describing those thoughts that they have themselves. They suddenly think, oh my goodness, I'm not alone. The amount of people that they email me and say, I thought I was the only person that ate donuts at 3 o'clock in the morning when they were already full up. I'm like, no, are you kidding? There's millions of us. We're all just doing it very quietly until one of us decides to stick it on YouTube. It does come down to your words. What was interesting about the music on your video? You put music on your video. Obviously, I say obviously because everyone that watches social media knows that you can't have an inspirational journey story without cheesy music. Something that I learned very, very early on in my YouTube career, inverted commas, was that putting music to videos is just a pain in the ass. I mean, it just timing it right. I can never find the right tune. I hate
copyright usage laws and getting flagged and all this stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. And it would sound. I didn't like it. So I thought, I'll tell you what, I won't do it. I just won't do it. So when you sent me your video, I thought, I'm going to get flagged for this music, and that's a palaver. I said, send me the raw file without the music on it. So he did. And I listened to it without the music. And the first thing I thought was, oh my, this is better. This is better without the music straight away, because I can focus on the words you are saying. I mean, almost the reason lots of social media nonsense has dramatic music over it is because if you take the dramatic music off, what that person's saying is just gibberish, just gobbledygook. But yours wasn't. Yours was words that actually made sense and sounded like they'd come from a real human being with who really meant it. And I thought, what I need to do is I need to put some music on this. But I kept it real quiet. I didn't even start the music until you'd already explained the kind of the downside of your position. And I mean, it's tricky because when you hear your own voice, especially if you're not used to it, it's very easy to think, oh, it needs something else. The minute I heard it, I thought it doesn't need anything else. It needs, I mean, I was tempted to put it up without any music at all. So yeah, your voice just cut through, and the things you were saying. Before we get into what you're doing now, because I'm fascinated as to what your life is like now and how people have responded to that. I want to just kind of finish off on almost the kind of the sort of the pre-healthy you with your COVID experience, because COVID for me is fascinating in terms of how we as a society have sort of responded to it with our own interest in health or not. Because I went into COVID in great shape physically. I started my journey about 10 years before COVID came along. So by the time it arrived, I was doing good. In fact, I got COVID and tested positive, and I jumped on my bike and I did a 4-hour bike ride in my garage, completely unaffected by it. Had I had COVID when I'd been at my worst, I would have been genuinely very, very scared and I mean, just frightened. And that was you. What was that like? Because I'm imagining grim.
Yeah, it wasn't very awesome. Went into, I had just come off, a couple years earlier, I'd done that whole carnivore keto thing. And the whole thing about that is, it reduces all your inflammation and all your inflammation responses. And so COVID hits and I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to change my diet in a way that reduces this risk. So I'm just going to eat all keto again to reduce my inflammation. Tell you what, didn't help. Doesn't work. Okay.
No, you can't just chew on organ meat nonstop and you're immune.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So when I got COVID, I was like, well, that didn't work out very well. So I got really, really sick. And, it was probably around day 8 or 9. And that's kind of when it starts really peaking for those who get it really bad.
Yep.
To where I felt like this could be it for me. I actually have a file on my file server that says in case I die, and in there are videos that tearful videos I recorded for each member of my family, because I thought that likely in the next week or so I'm not here, and I needed to apologize to my kids, to my wife, for not taking care of myself well enough to where this was actually an issue.
And people need to remember at this point, you are what, 36 years old, 37 years old?
Yep, 36.
The idea that at 37, you're recording effectively a goodbye message.
It's pretty grim.
Absolutely. Yeah, no other word for it. Yeah.
Apologizing to my daughters for not being there for their weddings, and to my sons for not being there to see their kids born, whatever it is, right? All the things I was going to miss because I didn't take care of myself. And I still have those videos. I don't watch them very much because it hurts to watch them a lot. I probably haven't watched them for a year or so now, but it's a reminder that life is short and that there's a lot of things we can do to reduce the feeling that we need to apologize to those that we could have done better.
Sometimes people will say to me, when I talk, they say, especially people that don't exercise and don't look after themselves, they'll say, you put so much time and effort into it. Is it worth it? And I'll sometimes say, well, who knows? But maybe if I get to live a little bit longer, and they'll say, yeah, you get hit by a bus tomorrow. And here's the thing: if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, then so be it. That's life. Because you're right, life is brutal and it can be short and horrible. And if I get hit by a bus, then yeah, that's just shitty. That just is. But there's a world of difference between placing yourself in front of it, effectively through diet, or indeed anything, any destructive tendency that you have. And that's not to say that solving those destructive tendencies is easy. That solving them is evidentially staggeringly hard. But if you can find a way of doing it, absolutely do it. And if you get hit by a bus, then so be it. Sod's law, tough luck. That did not mean trying to fix it was wrong.
Yeah, just because life happens and shit happens doesn't mean that, like you said, like you don't want to have something that you have to apologize for. You don't want to have things that you regret. You can't regret, oh, somebody accidentally hit me with a bus. And people who got COVID and died who are completely healthy, like they have nothing to apologize for, right? That is just the way life shakes out. But in my case, I knew very acutely that this was a disease that affected the comorbidities. And the major comorbidity of this disease was obesity. And that's my fault. That there was more I could have done. Now, some people struggle with all sorts of thyroid issues or other issues that affect them. But in my case, I knew in my case, my issue was I didn't move enough and I ate too much. And that's on me. And I didn't care enough for that reason. So that's why I felt like I had to apologize. It was really scary. And then the worst thing that could have happened is that as I'm peaking with this COVID, I got appendicitis. And
I should clarify that the worst thing that could have happened was you got hit by a bus.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I guess yeah, but like if you wanted to roll a condition that you wanted to have nothing to do with at the same time as COVID, it was appendicitis, at least to me. And so I got rushed to the hospital, and those were very difficult days because at that time the hospital is, oh no, only the one who is sick who can come in. So basically, I kissed my wife, my death kiss goodbye at, the door to the hospital, and she had to drive home and explain to her kid, to our kids why dad might not be coming home, and they couldn't operate on me because my lungs were so destroyed from the COVID that they said if I went under anesthesia, I would never wake up again. They would never be able to wake me up. And so they had to load me full of the nastiest levels of antibiotics possible to try to get my appendicitis under control. And lucky for me, 18 hours of antibiotics through an IV drip a day for a week ended up getting it to calm down enough to where I could recover from my COVID. They kept me on oxygen for pretty much that whole time because my oxygen sats were down in the 70s and all sorts of nasty stuff. And I went home, and a month later, when my body had more fully recovered from COVID, I was able to get my appendix taken out. But it was a super scary time because I knew that at any minute that appendix says, I'm out, I'm going to rupture. And that would have been it. And the irony was that COVID didn't directly kill me, but because of my weight and because I couldn't fight COVID and because of X, Y, and Z, the appendix would have just been my ticket punched, Anyway, it was scary. It was very scary. And it was because of my weight that it was as scary as it was.
This is something you told me when we chatted last time. And I think it just kind of emphasizes the gravity of the situation. You mentioned that your wife and kids would drive around to the parking lot at the back of the hotel, the hospital, because they could see you at the window. And that was the only way they could really kind of communicate with you, because obviously they can't physically meet you.
Yeah.
So you're waving them out the window.
They made little signs, like you'd usually see at races like, "Go Dad, go," but it was like, "We love you, Dad, get well soon." And we'd talk on the phone or through a video call, and I'd just sit at the window and look at them. I was up on the second floor and they were down on the ground floor, and they'd look up at me and they could wave to me through the window. And that was tough.
What fascinates me about your COVID story is that when you then recovered, so you have your appendix out and your COVID's gone, you don't immediately decide to get in shape. And I understand that completely. And so many people won't. So many people will think, well, that's the bottom of the barrel. So immediately you like a phoenix from the COVID flames, this kind of ultra runner emerges. But that isn't how it works. I mean, anyone that knows an alcoholic will have countless stories of them walking out of hospital and walking into the pub. Everybody got worse after COVID. Statistically, you look at the stats for the number of people suffering from diabetes or pre-diabetes or people simply being obese. Everyone's got worse. And yet we've just had a period of time where people who were simply too fat had a higher chance of dying. I don't know if there's a bigger motivator than being dead to encourage people along. I simply don't think there is, which tells us not that people are therefore lazy and stupid and greedy, but that there is just so much more to it than lazy, stupid, and greedy. And it's not supposed to make sense because what you're doing isn't sensible. I mean, it's so important to kind of get that through to people.
You can't reason your way to the solution for this one because the science is there. Like it's hard to explain to people that when it comes down to it, weight loss is 100% a math equation. That's all it is. It's energy expenditure and energy intake being in the appropriate balance to elicit weight loss or weight gain. That's all it is. And yet it is not that either. It is not that simple. That is the science behind it, but
that's like me saying to you, pop over to the UK, just make sure that lift exceeds gravity and you'll be fine.
Right.
You'll be like, well, hang on, I might need more than just that equation.
Yeah, the science is there, but it doesn't mean I can actually put it into any real effect in my life that means anything.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, exactly that. I have people say it all the time. It's calories in, it's calories out. It's the laws of thermodynamics. Every time I get told, if I had a donut every time someone said the laws of thermodynamics,
you'd be 450 pounds.
I'd be 600, and then some. I mean, the science is almost, it's not irrelevant because at the end of the day, it's what will make the difference. But it's irrelevant when you're stood in front of the fridge, not wanting to open it.
It doesn't have any real application to the majority of people.
No more than walking into an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and saying, "Hey, everyone, just stop drinking." I mean, it's as nonsensical as that. And yet there are people who would say, "Well, that's the solution." Well, it's a good job you're not running an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting then. No, I mean, it's fascinating that you went through that. That's as low as you can get. You're recording those videos. I mean, people just remind themselves you're recording videos apologizing that your behavior put you in a situation where you might not see your kids grow up. You get over it and you eat more food. I mean, again, it's not supposed to make sense. And hopefully what I'm explaining here is kind of boggling the minds of people to the point where some of them at least might think, do you know what? There might be more to it than just yelling, eat less, move more, fatty. There might be more to what I need to suggest than just that, because there is more to it. So, but then you do decide. Actually, was there a moment for you? Was there ta-da, today's the day, or not? For me, there wasn't. I just suddenly found myself.
It was kind of. It's weird. So we're talking about this. It was a year after I almost died. I was basically before COVID, I wasn't using a cane. And then about a year later, I was in worse enough shape that I had to use a cane because I gotten to that point, where I just continued to let my health decline. And I had to walk assisted pretty much everywhere I went. And that was tough. But there was, I don't know, like, I had come to accept that, you know what, when my ticket gets punched, my ticket gets punched. I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, but everyone dies. I'm just going to die earlier than most. And yes, it's going to be my fault. And I'm going to have to say sorry in these videos and whatever. But I guess this is just my lot in life. This is what it is for me. And the weirdest thing happened. So I'm on vacation in Mexico in late January 2022. And I'm with my family. And it was like a few days before we're supposed to fly back to the States. And as you can imagine, flying is a horrible experience for somebody my size and for those who have to sit on either side of me. So whenever I flew, I had to make sure I was flying with my wife or my children so that we could raise the armrests and they would just have to get cozy with big old dad, right? And but one of the other issues that you have is you can't fit into an airplane bathroom. Well, everyone started getting sick down in Mexico the last few days that we were there. And it was one of those both ends kind of illnesses. And I was feeling okay, but then I realized I wasn't feeling 100 the night before we were flying out. And so
I got to say at this point, your story is already sounding worse than the COVID story.
Right, exactly. And so I'm horrified at this point of what, I'm putting the pieces together. 1 + 1 is equaling 2 here. And so I had to go. I had a nephew who was not potty trained yet, and I had to borrow some diapers from my sister and line my pants with my nephew's diapers, because I knew that I was at the size where not only could I not functionally use the restroom, I was at the size where I functionally could not fit through an airline restroom door. I could not get in there. It was impossible. It would have required, breaking certain laws of physics in order for that to happen. And so I realized that if I got sick in that manner on the plane, I was going to have to prepare myself to sitting next to my lovely bride, do what I needed to do sitting next to her. And luckily for me, that didn't happen. But as I'm going to the airport, swishing with the stupid diapers inside my pants, for some reason, that was the buck stops here moment. That while I might die and leave my wife and children without a husband and a father, while I might leave them to having to figure out the rest of this world on their own, while I might not be able to play with them, for some reason in that moment, it was not as bad as potentially having to potentially shame my wife or embarrass them or put them in a really uncomfortable position on that plane that day. I can't really tell you why that did it, because when, again, you take a logic and you try to apply logic to this scenario, obviously the first that I described is way worse, that my wife is going to grow, is going to have to live the rest of her life or until she finds somebody much handsomer than I am, without a husband. And my children were all going to go off for the rest of their lives without a father. And yet that wasn't enough. So that doesn't make sense. But that day when I walked to the airplane, I didn't have the Pop-Tarts. And when I went to the convenience shop, when we got back to the States, before I got on my next flight to get home, I grabbed a healthier option. I grabbed something better for me to eat that day. And then when we got to the hotel, I made different choices about the volume of food I was going to eat. Not necessarily eating the right thing, but I ate less that night because it stops today. And that was February 7th of 2022, when I said, no, it's done. And doesn't make sense.
Anybody that does nonsensical behavior will tell themselves a narrative that fits that behavior, because you can't go through life nonsensical. You might appear like that from the outside, but to yourself, it has to make sense. And so you will create a story that you're living in, where everything you're doing does make sense. And well, if I die, it doesnit matter because, that it's just my time is up. That's one of the little stories you tell yourself. And it happens all the time. I mean, you see it a lot with anybody that suffers from an addiction. Well, will do the most crazy things, but when you ask them why, we'll have a story. That story won't make sense to you, but to them it makes perfect sense. And if you put yourself in their shoes, you can see, okay, well, I can see why they would do that. That they would drink too much because they do think this is, and it all starts to, the jigsaw starts to fit, albeit a jigsaw that only they can ever build. I don't have an airplane story along those lines, because my decision to get in shape just kind of gradually crept up on me. I was facing divorce, and I read a stupid book on saving your marriage, and the only sentence in the entire book that actually was sensible was get yourself in shape, because if that means your wife stays with you because you're in better shape, then good. If your wife leaves you anyway, good. You're now in better shape. You need to be. In fact, you probably need to be in better shape now more than ever. And it just, I suddenly thought, that just makes sense about everything. No matter what happens to me, lose my house, lose my family, there's, I could be living under a bridge. If I'm doing it with a six pack rather than being £400, that's going to be a better bridge to live under. And so that's why I started my journey. The airplane story I have, which is quite funny because it sticks with me to this day. I used to eat a lot when I traveled. So I'd get to the airport and I'd start stuffing myself and I'd eat on the plane. And I would eat so much that I would feel uncomfortable. I'd feel bloated and stuffed. But that was just how I lived. I was always bloated and stuffed. And I found myself on an airplane a long time ago, long before 9/11 and the sort of security measures we have on planes nowadays. And I'm on a plane flying to New York for a holiday. And I'm stuffed already. I've eaten just huge amounts of food, and the couple in front of me start arguing to the extent that the guy next to his wife or girlfriend, whoever it was, starts becoming quite physical with her. And a flight attendant walked over, and he was only a little guy, and the guy got up and confronted him, and I'm sat behind, and I thought, oh my goodness, this is going to suddenly turn into a fight. I'm 6'6". I'm a large man. I'm the largest person on this plane. I have a sort of a moral responsibility to intervene if anything goes south here. And it occurred to me that I felt so stuffed that if I got up too fast, I'd probably vomit before anything else. And to this day, I never fly on a plane unless I'm fasted. It does my wife's head in. We go to airports, she'll say, "You having something to give it?" No, I'm getting on the plane. I will not eat before I fly. She'll say, "Why?" I'll say, "Because if someone tries to hijack it or something, I need to be peak condition."
Well, it's one of those things. Like if your plane goes down and you have to get outside that tiny little door in the emergency, how am I supposed to? I struggled at that weight, deciding whether or not I needed to shimmy down the aisle sideways or straight on, because both ways I was just as wide. I was wider in every direction than the aisle was. I was going to scrub people's shoulders all the way down. And I've often had those thoughts when I was that heavy is, if I have to get to that wing emergency exit and go down that slide, I'm not 100% sure I'm going to be that whole, I don't know if you remember these old cartoons, but Winnie the Pooh getting stuffed in rabbits, the hole in the rabbit house. Yeah, that was going to be me. They're going to have to push me from behind to get me to uncork.
Yeah, well, you need Tigger bouncing up and down your ass.
Yeah, exactly.
So no, it's I have so many of those. I can remember going on roller coaster rides and stuff with my kids, and first of all being just worrying that when that thing comes down to lock you in, it's not going to fit because my upper body was too big for it. And then when I do fit in it, miraculously, then just being worried.
What's the weight rating?
Nobody that. Well, yeah, no one that heavy has been on that roller coaster that day. I can guarantee that. I'm the heaviest. So if it is on the verge of breaking, I'm the one that's going to break it, and I'm going to now fly off into the into the ether.
You're wondering what the stress load of those bolts holding that chair in place are, and did the engineer think about me? Did they think about me?
I've been there. It's a horrible place to be. So you get yourself you get yourself out of your homemade diapers, and you decide to get in shape.
Yeah.
What does that look like? For me, I just went out the door and started running and stopped eating.
Yeah,
what did you do?
Because I was still cane bound. No matter how much I wanted to hit the ground running, and obviously the whole Rocky theme song hits your brain, and then you take 3 steps out the door and realize, oh, I'm not Rocky. I can't do this. So you had to start small. And so what I did was I just started tracking what I ate. I knew that at the heart of it, calories in versus calories out, but I knew I wasn't in a position in terms of habits and building on a foundation. I was building on a foundation of failure. I'm a big metaphor guy. I really like, symbolism. And so I see images in my head and I construct images in my head that make sense to me. And one of them is that I have this long history of placing broken bricks in this foundation of my life, of my health. And that I clearly couldn't build a house on a foundation made of broken bricks, of failing, of saying I was going to do something and then not doing it. Because every time I tried to lose weight for the last decade had been, I'm going to do this. And then I fail and I go, oh, well, that sucks. Add another broken brick to the pile of my success story, right? And so I knew I had to do things that were relatively easy for me to win at. I had to start building wins, and I had to start replacing the broken bricks in my foundation with bricks of success, of succeeding in whatever that looked like. And so it started out as just counting what I ate. I didn't have to worry about what it was. I didn't have to worry about if it was healthy or not healthy. I didn't have to worry if it was a lot of food or a little food. I just had to count what I ate. And if 2,000 steps, 2,500 steps was my max right now, then I was going to do 3,000 steps. I wasn't going to do 10,000 steps a day because I knew that was just going to be another broken brick in my foundation because I would fail. So 3,000. I could do those things. I could count everything I ate, and I could walk 3,000 steps a day. And so I started doing that. And then when I felt after a week or two straight of being able to hit those 3,000 steps a day, I felt like I was finding success there. I bumped it up to 3,500 steps a day for a week, and then to 4,000 steps a day. And then with my diet, when I got really comfortable and in the mode and succeeding at counting what I ate, I said, okay, well, what am I eating roughly on average today? Okay, I'm going to drop that by 500 calories until that feels okay. And then when that felt okay and I was able to, I'm still eating 3,500 calories a day, but it was something I could do. And then after a while, I finally got those calorie levels down to about 2,200 calories a day, where I felt like, okay, this is still pushing it, but I'm finding success here. I'll stay here. And then I started saying, okay, I need to emphasize protein more. I need to start thinking about what it is I'm eating instead of how much I'm eating. And so I just started making little tiny tweaks. And the way that this all works for me is it starts building this foundation of strong blocks of succeeding and replacing all the blocks of failure out of it. And so now what I have is a foundation of I do what I say I'm going to do, and I'm showing up for myself. And then from then on out, it's just taking those kind of like an old school head unit for, stereos and stuff. You got all the little dials and stuff, and you can match it, and you're trying to tune it just right, and you're trying to find the right station, or you got a CB radio and you're trying to dial it in right. It's listening to what you're hearing, what is coming at you, taking all those inputs, taking a minute to introspect and say what's working, what's not working, and what dial should I start slowly turning to make changes in the direction that I want it to go, and experimenting with myself as an experiment of one. And that's all I did. And I know it sounds really simple, but you do that for enough days and enough weeks and enough months, and you start seeing these big changes. There's a book, I can't remember the details, so I apologize. It's actually a relatively famous book for a lot of people who do a lot of endurance sports, but it was one of I believe it was the trainer, the head coach of the British cycling team. And I believe his whole theory was that by making a bunch of even sub 1% changes,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I've also forgotten the name of the book as well, but I know the one you mean. Yeah, they changed the tiniest things, but everything.
It all compounds. It all adds up into enormous change. And so even if you only better yourself by a fraction of a percent every day, if you're moving in that direction, who cares about whatever timeline you set? There's no deadline. Like, the deadline for our lives is death, right? Like that is the last time you can do anything about it, is when you die. But until then, who cares how long it takes? If it takes 5 years, 10 years, 1 year, it doesn't matter. Be moving in the right direction and making those changes to get there. And that's how I found success. And that's all I've continued to do. And I guess that's why I'm running ultra marathons now, because it's just like, okay, I guess the next 1% is more than a marathon, and so you just keep going further and further and further. And
I call it it's the kind of the philosophy of aim low, you've got ages.
Yeah.
I have so many people say to me, oh, I'm running a 35-minute or a 40-minute park run, and it's I've only knocked 10 seconds off, and I'll say, well, hang on a minute. You're aiming too high if you want to do more than that. That you've knocked. Aim low doesn't mean aim down. It just means aim just a little bit above where you are at the moment.
Yeah.
You knock 10 seconds off every time you do a park run. In 7 years' time, you're now the world record holder. So actually, what we've now established, because you're never going to be the world record holder, we've actually established that what you think is too small an increase we've now established it's actually so large an increase, it's not even sustainable. Because you're not going to be the world record holder. One of the problems we have with social media nowadays is that no one gives themselves time to see those good things to come. They simply think, well, it's January. and I want to be ripped by April. And if I'm not, I'm going to be depressed. Well, hang on a minute. Why don't you just worry about being in reasonable shape by September, and you've then got every other year for the rest of your life to be whatever you want. It doesn't have to happen now.
Yeah, what's so special about April of 2024? There's nothing special about that. It's a weird thing for you to say that April means something when it means nothing to the universe. It means nothing.
Yeah, yeah. It's like people that say, I'm going to start on Monday.
Yeah, what's up with Monday?
Yeah.
What's wrong with now? Let's do it now.
Yeah, or Tuesday. If you're going to wait till Monday, why not? Or New Year's resolutions or any of that kind of stuff. If something is better for you, then do it now. If you're saying, I know it's better for me, but I'm simply going to enjoy a period of time before I start it, then fine. Be clear to yourself, be honest with yourself as to what you're doing, and do that. But just setting a kind of, well, it's Monday or it's the 1st of January or these kind of things are just, they're not you. They're not yours. You don't own Monday. It means nothing to you, really. So I try and get people to just, ignore that and ignore the social media expectation of look amazing, because social media unfortunately presents us currently with either you can be gigantic and it's great and it's brave and it's empowering and you can be fit and fat and all that kind of stuff, or you need to be the Rock, and there is no, well, actually no, you can just be a normal healthy human being.
Just be you.
Yes, indeed. I mean, which is what we try and do,
and try to be a better you. It's okay to want to be a better you, but you're still going to be you. You're not going to be the Rock. You're not going to be whoever it is that you're aspiring to be. You can use them as inspiration. They can be a voice in your head that helps guide you, but you're not going to be that. You have to take that in yourself. It's actually interesting. I was talking to a friend recently, and it really, I've thought about this for a long time, that when I first started losing weight, I realized that my friends and family were all very supportive. They're all very supportive, but there's that adage of you are an amalgam of basically the 5 people that you are closest with, right? That you surround yourself with. And while my friends and family are all very good people, they weren't necessarily the people I needed at that time in my life in order to be the people I was closest with. So what I did is I walked a lot. I mean, we're talking lots. I walked a lot. And what I did on those walks is I listened to podcasts. You didn't have your podcast yet, but I watched a lot of your YouTube videos, but I also listened to podcasts. I listened to a lot of Rich Roll. I listened to, there's another guy out there called Ethan Suplee. He's, So I listened to him. There's a lot of people that I listened to, and I surrounded myself with a lot of information. And this friend of mine called out that says that it's interesting because it was almost like they could see that I was becoming this weird mashup of all these voices in my head, that I wasn't David Goggins, but yet I still had Goggins in me. He was a part of me. I wasn't Rich Roll, and yet here he was. I wasn't Sam Harris, and yet that philosophy was still becoming a part of who I was. And I'm this amalgam of it. And it was a voice in my head. And so it is so good and healthy, I think, to surround yourself with people who you aren't ever going to become. And that's okay, because you can become an amalgam of these people that are important to you.
I've run over many a mountain trying to get my head around Sam Harris and his concept of free will. I've been there.
Yeah, like, I guess I didn't choose to do this, but here I am anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, indeed, yeah.
But yeah, it's just fascinating that you look at these figures and you'll never be them, and you have to be okay with never being them. But it's okay to have them be a part of you, if that makes sense. And so you were saying that, it's this dichotomy of, okay, you have to be fat and fabulous, or, roided up and, as large as you can be, like, whatever figure it is that you're looking at over on the other side. Or, you have to, I'll never be Courtney DeWalter, or whoever it is, the running figure that you're looking at, or whatever personality you're looking at. And yet you can still grow and learn off of them. That's not a bad thing, to surround yourself with voices that are empowering you and strengthening you and helping you learn more about yourself. But you have to make sure that along that way, you don't lose yourself. I
talk on the YouTube channel a lot about using people for motivation and not emulation.
Yeah.
And it frustrates me a lot when people say, But yeah, the content that you've produced, Mark, is not relevant for X, Y, Z reason. And I think, well, hang on a minute, I've got a 70-year-old grandma here in Ohio who's telling me that she's gone for a jog because of what I'm doing. So if she can do it, then I'm sure. Well, if you can't, you can't. Then it's just not. It's not for you. If you're looking to someone to emulate, this isn't the channel for you. Um, it's so important that you take little bits from people that make you better. You don't simply say, "Well, I'm no good. I'll be them," because that just doesn't work. Clear. I mean, it sounds obvious, but no one is there. In fact, if anybody could stop themselves and simply become Dave Goggins, they'd probably just end up in hospital. It's not a particularly it's good for him,
Right.
and only him really. But if you can take a little bit, I mean, for example, I find Goggins more amusing than motivational. However, there will be times where I'm on top of a mountain in the rain, and my earpods are soaked, so I can't listen to Sam Harris anymore. And I just have to tell myself, what would Goggins do? He'd think, good, rain harder. I hope it rains harder. And for 30 seconds, I'll put aside the fact that I laugh at Goggins throwing himself handcuffed into duck ponds and stuff, and I'll be David Goggins. And then when the rain stops, I put Sam Harris back in, and Goggins is a nutcase again. So I've got very good at thinking, it's almost like tools in your box. Who do I need to kind of pluck from the toolbox today?
Yeah.
Although I also still, I mean, it's important, I think, for people to hear people like us who are kind of a voice out there in social media, explaining that we are still not perfect. I still find myself sucked into. For example, over Christmas, I started watching the Jack Reacher stuff. I hadn't watched it. I'm a big Tom Cruise fan, so out of respect for Tom Cruise, I hadn't watched the new Jack Reacher. And I thought, oh no, I'll give in. Everyone kept telling me it was amazing, so I watched Jack Reacher, and within about 3 or 4 episodes, I just wanted to get jacked and huge, and I was having double protein shakes and stuff, and had to almost give myself a slap and say, "What on earth are you doing? That's not what you want to be."
Yeah, could I live out of the things that fit in my jean pockets, just like Jack Reacher does? That's going to be me.
Exactly. What was quite beneficial actually was that in the second season he starts running around a bit, and I realized that he actually couldn't physically run very well. So I thought actually that there's a downside to
I haven't started season 2 yet.
Okay, well, you'll enjoy it. In season 2, Alan Richardson never runs for more than about 5 seconds, and when he does, he doesn't look like he'd actually catch anybody. So
quite unlike Tom Cruise, by the way, who looks like the guy can haul.
Do you know the reason I still love Tom Cruise as Jack Reacher is that Tom Cruise looks like he could just beat the hell out of somebody and chase them down or run away from them. I understand why in the books Jack Reacher is as big as he is, because in a book you need to kind of conjure up a mental image yourself, and you need that. But actually, no, Jack Reacher himself, in fact, actually talking about Goggins and stuff, there aren't many, if any, 6'5", 250-pound Navy SEALs, because they'd be left on the beach when they're trying to launch some sort of attack they'd be struggling to get out the sand dunes because they're too big and slow. What was interesting, I find myself watching Jack Reacher and wanting to be Jack Reacher. Then, and this goes back to telling ourselves stories, I then get into watching, and we spoke about this a little bit last time as well, I then get into watching Yellowstone, and I then tell myself, well, hang on a minute, in Yellowstone, apparently the most attractive man here is Rip. If you've not seen Yellowstone, there is one character in it who is basically a classic, hopefully I'm not going to offend Americans, he's a kind of a classic American big guy. He's a big kind of bear of a guy. He's not in shape. And yet, in fact, ironically, he's the only character in Yellowstone who never gets a shirtless scene, because it wouldn't go down well. Kevin Costner's running around shirtless half the time, but not Rip. And yet he is that kind of big, burly, wears plaid, drives a truck. He's a kind of big, all-American guy. And so I start telling myself, well, actually, I can just eat a bit more and not worry about it. Instead, I'll be Rip. And I get to January, I think, hang on a minute, how about I don't be Jack Reacher, I don't be Fat Rip, I just get back to doing what I'm doing. So I see how easy it is to get sucked into following some complete lunatic on social media. Tell me what you're up to now, because you mentioned before we came on air, you're running tomorrow.
Yes.
And actually, this goes back to our Goggins bit. You're running Moab, aren't you, tomorrow?
Yeah, so I signed up for a race series down in Utah for the winter. This is stupid. I need to take an off season, but I don't do it. But I signed up for a winter trail racing series down in Moab. So I ran the Dead Horse 50K Ultra down in November, and then I ran a 50 miler, the Arches 50 miler a few weeks back, and now I'm going to run a 55K tomorrow called the Moab's Red Hot Ultra. So
I haven't run a decent long run in a while, and I'm half jealous hearing you talk about going to do it, and I'm half disappointed in myself because I'm not quite in shape to go and do it. What goes through your mind when you're running? Because you talk about using a cane to walk, and that's not long ago. You were walking with a cane, a cane made out of like a steel girder, I'm assuming, given your weight.
it was interesting. It was really actually kind of hard to find a cane that
I
had
bet
the
it
advertised
was.
weight rating. So
No, you needed the same guy designing my roller coasters
yeah,
to build that cane for you. So you're using a cane. We're talking a couple of years ago now, 2 or 3 years ago. And well, in fact, your journey is 2 years long, isn't it? And now you're running 50Ks. Do you ever stop? Well, I say stop. While you're running, does it ever go through your head how incredible that transition is? Because it
it's
is.
crazy. Well, it's been an interesting thing. I talked about experimenting and twisting those dials and making incremental progress, and I found something really interesting along the way that while I mentioned 10 or 12 years back that I had made some changes with my health and lifestyle that didn't stick, and I never got I ran, but it was like, oh, I could run maybe a half marathon, something like that, so it was good. It just wasn't like it is now. But I found this time around that the more I feed it, it's almost like a magnification chamber, that the more I feed this thing, the more I feed my effort, the more I feed my body, the more I get back in return in positive ways. And I started running a year and a half ago or so. I'd lost maybe close to 100 pounds. I thought, okay, I think I can start running. I was about 350. I think I can probably start doing this now, or I'm not going to do too much damage. I found that I had a lot of little aches and pains. And just for several months, it was just this thing where like, this hurts, that hurts. And then I found something really interesting, and I don't recommend this for people, but it seems to work for me, is the more I give it, the better I feel. And so I started adding extra days of running in and more miles and more and more and more. And pretty soon I found that if I run 7 days a week, I don't get injured. And if I run more than 30, 40, 50 miles a week, I feel better than I do if I run 20 miles a week. And so my average miles a week is like 60 miles a week these days. And I just keep feeding it, and it works. And so it's like, okay, I guess this is what I'm doing now. And it's amazing. And there are times where I'm running through, whatever mountain I'm running, or even just through town. If I'm doing a road run, I'm running past a shopping mall or something way up, I get really emotional when I think about what it is I'm doing, and that I'm able to do. That I went from somebody who I have a distinct memory, and it wasn't that it was only this one time that it hurt, but I had this distinct memory of, we live in kind of a split level house. And I remember walking up from this sunken living room, and there's only about 8 steps to get up to the upstairs to the kitchen. And I remember being a couple steps up and having to stop, and I cried because it hurt so bad, because I could barely move up these stairs. I mean, we're talking not very far, few steps, right? And I couldn't do it. And now here I am, ticking off mile 7 or 8 on my long run. And I'm like, good grief, what am I doing? This is amazing. And there's also something just so beautifully freeing about moving through nature as an alive creature in this world, that it's your own 2 feet. You're not being, you're not riding a contraption of gears and wheels and pulleys and chains that gets you from point A to B, which I love cycling. I love it. But there's something magical about running through the mountains and knowing that you are doing what your ancestors 100,000 years did, and there's nothing more natural than running through nature.
It's primal. It's a primal thing, isn't
So
it?
primal, and it's emotional.
It triggers. Yeah. Yeah.
Everything. And it's amazing. And I don't know how to put it together. People ask me how I do it, and I don't say this to be kind of like humble braggy or anything like that. I don't know how it works out, because 2 years in, from 450 pounds walking with a cane to today, I shouldn't be running all these races, but I can, and I'm not going to question the universe as to why I can. I'm just going to do it because I can.
Yeah. No, I'm a huge fan of two things: of all the gear and all the complicated tech and all the sports stuff that I buy and spend stupid amounts of money on. I love all the toys, but exactly as you say, when I'm running across the top of a mountain, especially when you can see where you've been, you can turn around, you can see the other mountain that you were on 4 hours before, and you're now on this one because you ran down the valley, you ran out the other side, and you get a real sense that you moved through nature over that distance with nothing other than you. It is primal. I tell anybody, once you can run 3, 4, 5K, if you can do a park run or something, book yourself in.
You
absolutely
unlock something.
Go and do a 10K trail. Half the people will be walking it anyway. There is something about crossing over streams, going across a field, through a wood. There is just something very, it's almost as though your brain is kind of going, hey, I remember this. And you don't. It's from 10,000 years ago. But
you're plugging into a genetic memory that you shouldn't have, and yet it feels right.
Yeah. Yeah. Doing it with my dog, there is something about running with my dog as well that amps that up even more. Running through a wood, following my dog, hopping over trees and stuff is what's nice is that I could be doing that activity 100,000 years ago or today, and it would be exactly the same. There'd be no difference. Yep. It's a beautiful thing. I encourage anybody. You don't need to be. People think that ultra runners need to be ultra runners. You don't. You just need to be able to get out and about. In fact, Jen, my wife, ran an ultra. She started running ultra marathons last year, and she pretty much got up to the point where she could do a 10K just about, and then just did a really, really slow 50K and walked a bit, ran a bit, jogged a bit, walked a bit.
You don't have to be fast to do this. It's open for anybody. My 50 miler that I just did, plenty of walking. I mean, I felt like it was a good time for me, but I averaged about 12 and a half minute miles over the 50 miles. And that's, for most people, you get online, you get the elitist commenters and stuff go, that's not running, that's jogging or whatever. I'm like, okay, calm down. All right. When you're running 50 miles, maybe you can say something about it, but you don't have to be Superman. You don't have to be Jim Walmsley or Courtney Dauwalter or, Usain Bolt or anything. You're just you, and you just move through nature. Just keep going.
Almost more so with ultras. It's a bit of a weird one, because if you do a half marathon, for example, I know my half marathon time, or at least I know my personal best. I've got a 1 hour 35, and my goal is to one day run a sub 130, which at my size would be cool. And so if I was to run one tomorrow, I'd be very, very fixated on my pace and my time and all that stuff. But when you do an ultra, all that goes away, unless you literally are one of the elites. It just becomes about achieving the objective of A to B. It's a very simplistic process that you can get bogged down in the pace and the numbers, but I like just setting off and having nothing on my mind other than achieving the objective. And in fact, actually, when I see the times that people set when they walk those things, I'm almost more in awe of them than they are the guy that won it. I mean, I did a 100K race last year. Actually, I did it the year before. Jen did it last year. The guy that won in something like 7.5 hours. As Jen was leaving the halfway point, it came over the tannoy that he'd arrived at the finish. However, there were some people that took 24, 25 hours to do that. They're doing a different event in a way to the guy that ran it in 7 hours and
Yeah.
then jogged home without a care in the world. These people at 25 hours, their toenails have all long since left them. The demands on the body are incredible. They're typically heavier than average. They're certainly heavier than the guy that won it in 7.5 hours. So that puts more demands on the joints and the cardiovascular system. It's to be applauded, people taking a bit longer. So anybody that thinks, oh, I'm not ready, if you can walk around, you're probably ready. You'd be amazed how many people at the start of an ultra are walking off across the finish line, the start line. They aren't. People kind of imagine
Yeah.
that everyone sort of tears off.
Well, people ask like, how do you run 50 miles or 50K, on the trails? And I'm like, I promise you, I would much rather run for 10 hours on these trails in my 50 miler than try to do a really fast 5K. Like
Yeah.
that's just the pain and the intensity of a brutally fast 5K is so much worse in those 20, 21, 22 minutes than 10 hours on the trail. Like it is so much more accessible than you think it is. It really is. It really is.
Yeah,
You don't
absolutely.
have to be a crazy athlete to do what we do. And some people get intimidated by that.
Yeah, no, 5K and a 10K is. I mean, when I do a 10K, it's non-stop, hard, sustained effort that is brutal from start to finish for me.
Yeah.
When I do an ultra, I'm looking at the views and a steep hill comes, so I'm walking up that, and then I'm jogging down the other side, and it's just, yeah, no. So anybody that's thinking, oh, I'm not too sure, absolutely, just go and do one. Last two things I want to wrap up with. I'm going to come onto your shirt because that's one of them, but we'll leave that for last. Here's what I'm curious about. Because I started my weight loss journey in the middle of a divorce, and that happened. And then when I met my Jen, my my current wife, I was already in shape. You went from being a 450-pound man to what you are now, a fine specimen of a human being. This might be a kind of a shallow question, but I'm just, or might suggest your wife has any kind of shallow thought processes that she indulges in. But I'm just fascinated what she thinks of the fact that she's got you and she had, however you would describe yourself previously.
She's Princess Leia, and she went from Jabba the Hutt to Han Solo. So, that's a good thing. But no, I don't. My wife has always been very supportive of me, and while I have, throughout our marriage, accused her of lying to me when she says that she's attracted to me, I'm now at a point, at least, mental health and such, and physical health, where now I can start to believe her. She's always been extraordinarily loving and just an amazing woman. But now I believe her, and she was probably still telling the truth before. She didn't really see my weight as a hurdle other than something to be concerned with, because she wanted me to be happy and she wanted me to be around for our children and for our family. So, but it has definitely it's improved my confidence in just being around her and other people. We also do a whole bunch of other things than we used to do. It used to be that, what do you want to do for date night tonight? Well, let's go out to eat at a dinner, eat dinner somewhere that has sturdy metal chairs and not booths, because Miles can't fit in a booth. So let's choose sturdy metal chair locations and then maybe go see a movie, but not at a normal theater. It's got to be the theaters that have the big reclining seats, because Miles can't fit in a normal theater seat. Or, maybe let's just give up and we'll order pizza and we'll just lay in bed at home, because that's where Miles feels the most comfortable. That was the old me. And now the new me is, hey, I haven't hiked to the top of this mountain yet or seen this waterfall. Would you like to come with me? Would that be a fun date night? We'll do a picnic date, and we'll bring our camping stoves and cook, cup of noodles on the top of a mountain somewhere, and that will be our date night, and that is a huge difference in terms of our relationship. It's night and day. And man,
Yeah,
that's
no,
one of the best things that's come out of this.
do you know, it's almost a pity because you'll never get the real truth from a partner, because a partner's job is not really to tell you the truth. That isn't always what you need. I always used to think of it a bit like top trumps, where as a human being you'd have different scores for different attributes. And so when my wife would say to me, "No, no, no, I love you just the way you are," I would be thinking, okay, but on the kind of the score for physical appearance, that's a 0. Now maybe there's enough 8s and 9s elsewhere that adds up to "I love you." But if we take those away and we simply look at nothing other than physical appearance, unless you have a weird fetish I don't know about, you don't love a 400-pound man that can't get up and move around and just.
If you're single and you show up at a party and you start looking around for who you want to have a conversation with, there's going to be one person, and it's likely not going to be the person I was.
Your wife has got an upgrade in you, so yeah, I'm not surprised she's pleased. Your shirts, what on earth's going on? And not only are your shirts ridiculous in a good way, I should add, you also run in them. And I don't understand that, because I run in kind of tight compression tops that keep everything snug and stop things from rubbing. And
I do that too. I have a lot of loose skin, as you can imagine. After losing 230 pounds, you're flipping and flopping. No matter how lean you are, you're going to be moving. So
yeah, so you're wearing compression stuff to keep everything.
Yeah. So I just wear the compression stuff to keep everything where it's supposed to be. And then because I still have some self-confidence issues in my head about the way the loose skin folds, or, you can see it through the clothes, I almost always am going to wear usually a t-shirt over the top of that as well. And then I started doing something a while back where, I kind of talked earlier about how that alcoholism is always on the other side of the door doing push-ups. Well, body dysmorphia and self-confidence issues are always the same thing. It's right there. And it's there that when you're feeling awesome on a run, all of a sudden you hear this voice in your head being like, yeah, but you're not really that good, or you don't look as good as you think you do, or whatever it is, right? It's that little voice in your head that you're always trying to deal with and you're trying to get rid of. And over time, I'm sure it'll get less and less. But those down days and those hard days still come. And so what I did initially was I bought a really bright yellow pair of running shoes. And whenever I woke up in the morning and I looked in the mirror and I did not feel as good of myself as I felt like I should be, I said, oh, this is a yellow shoe day. This is a yellow shoe day, because when I look down at those shoes, yellow is one of my favorite colors because it's just bright and sunny. It reminds me to be happy. I would look down at my shoes as I hang my head because I'm not feeling good about myself, and I'd see my shoes and I go, nope, I'm going to choose to be happy. I'm going to be positive. And I'm going to think about the good things that I have. And then I started doing that, and I noticed, I told a couple friends at my place of employment this, and the yellow shoes reminded them to be happy whenever I wore them. And they also knew that I was having a hard day, and that made them say, oh, Miles seems like he's got his life together and that he's this overwhelmingly positive person. And yet when he wears those yellow shoes, I know he's having a hard day. And so if I have a hard day, that's okay. I can be human too, because Miles is having one too, and he's wearing those yellow shoes. And it just started evolving to be like, I want to wear brighter colors on a more normal basis, because not only does it remind me to kind of tell those negative demons on my shoulder, hey, why don't you take a hike? But it's also telling other people the same thing, and it brings smiles to people's faces and it makes them laugh. And when they see some dude running an ultramarathon in the desert wearing a cougar with a desert eagle riding a unicorn shooting, fire out of his nose, they're like, what? That is amazing. And it makes me smile and it makes me feel good in that moment. And so I wear them for me, and I wear them to hopefully shed just a little bit of a chuckle and joy and positive thinking to other people. And it's ridiculous, and I'm okay with that. And another reason, this is another facet to this, I'm making a very short story very long. But when you are 450 pounds, you do everything you can to hide. You do everything you can to shrink as much as you
Yes.
can to not be
Yeah.
visible. And it's obviously impossible as a 450-pound person, but you try. And it was scary for me to start wearing bright clothing at first, even though I was trying to make myself happier. And I used it as almost a form of exposure therapy, to be like, Miles, stop hiding. For one, when you're 450 pounds, you never hid anyway. You might as well have worn all your bright clothing back then because you were 450 pounds. Whatever room you were in, you were visible. You were the worst hide and seek player of all time, right? So stop hiding, though, and be comfortable taking up the space that you as a human being of value and worth deserve to have in this world. And so I started wearing bright clothes and being goofy about it and saying, screw it, I'm not hiding anymore. I'm done hiding. And that has helped me to be even more confident. And it's all these little tips and tricks that I've tried to employ throughout the last couple of years that have added up to what I feel to be a pretty good life and a pretty good way to live. And I hope that some things that I do end up rubbing off on other people in ways that improve their lives, you know?
I'm going to just jump onto the comments on your video in a second to highlight that. The clothing thing is interesting because it makes perfect sense. You're pretty tall, aren't you? 6'4". I'm even taller, 6'6". You're always going to be spotted in a room, fat, thin, anything in between. I used to, same as you, I used to hate standing out, and I would hate standing out for obvious reasons at sporting locations because I felt so alien to be there. If I take my kids to play basketball, I'd be watching them, and their coaches would all be these sort of 20-something athletes, and I would just feel like a loser. I would hate it. So I did the same thing. That now, I mean, YouTube, I suppose, is a little bit of that. Once I got into a place where I felt confident in that space, in those spaces, I went overboard and said, not only will I be confident, I'll be famous. I mean, it's almost that. That was the mentality. How far can I go from wanting to sort of hide away from my own reflection in the gym mirrors to what's the opposite of that? Well, I'll have millions of people looking at me in the gym instead because I'll film myself and stick it out there. So that makes perfect sense. The point you made about rubbing off on other people, I just looked while we were talking. So and we've been talking for what, hour and a bit. Hundreds of people have watched the video. I mean, it's a constantly growing thing. I'm really excited about how many people are going to end up watching this thing. The latest comment on there, and it just sums it up. And I could have picked any of the hundreds and hundreds that are on there. Someone just said, I got tears in my eyes, vigorously applauding this man. I mean, it's simple as that. You should be, as I say, just very, very proud of what you did.
And thank you for putting it back out there. I didn't send it to you with any expectations. It was a thank you to you, and I'm just grateful that it's been positive for so many other people, and I hope it continues to be that for people.
Yeah, I hope that I mean, going right back to the thing that maybe put out there, you hated yourself in your favorite places. If there are people that can now enjoy their favorite places a tiny bit more because of what you showed them could be done, then that's a good thing. So yeah, again, thank you, and it's been an absolute pleasure chatting.
Yeah, likewise, Mark.